We have got a lot to get to, folks, so let's get after it and question more. Saudi Aramco, the insanely wealthy national oil company of Saudi Arabia, is teaming up with China's Nextel, announcing that it will establish a non-metallic excellence and innovation center in Beijing with the hopes that these non-metallic materials one day might replace carbon steel in construction projects. Now, this is a very similar partnership that Saudi Aramco has with others like the United States, the UK, and the UAE. But the partnerships between Saudi Arabia and China are getting deeper, folks, and I'm about to show you why. Last August, you had the 5th China Arab States Expo, where a total of 277 deals were made between these Arab states and China. Now, in those deals, you have all sides pouring boatloads, almost $24 billion into about 200 projects, with China giving $423 million of its own money to Saudi Arabia's Red Sea Integrated Smart Energy Investment Project, along with Saudi Arabia returning the favor with billions of dollars going to China's Belt and Road Initiative. Now, you might be asking yourself, why is Saudi Arabia, who has always relied on oil sales, now going green? Well, it's all part of a reform package promoted by the current Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, who wants to shift the Saudi economy away from oil. However, Saudi Arabia sells about a quarter of its oil to China now, and a new deal just struck last week. Saudi Arabia will now supply almost half of Poland's oil, which is kind of a bold move since Russia is right on Poland's backyard steps, but a U.S. ally, no more the less. Joining me now to make some sense of all of this, we have David Tawil. He's going to join us now. So there's a lot to unpack here, David. Great to see you again. I'm not going to hold it against you. You're a Michigan fan from this Purdue grad, so here we go. But a lot to unpack there. So let's just start with kind of the macro, and then we'll go to the micro. Saudi Arabia and China, as I mentioned, it's the biggest ally for the U.S. in the Middle East. Is teaming up with China a big slap in the face to the U.S., David?
Certainly. Certainly politically, it's a slap in the face. But let's go ahead and lay the groundwork, Farron, as you wanted to. First of all, MBS is no great friend of Joe Biden. He certainly was very close with the previous presidential administration, but he's certainly not getting any handouts from the current presidential administration. And if I'm MBS and I know that I'm being marginalized, at least for the duration of this presidential term, and who knows what happens after this, I certainly need to look to the rest of the world for allies. And who better than the deepest of pockets in China? It seems that Russia would be an incredibly violative move to the United States. China, maybe not so much so. And clearly, they are going to benefit immensely. And by the way, just to go back to your point about green initiatives, mind you, they are selling petrochemicals, meaning they come from petroleum, right? So they are certainly using their most abundant natural resource to go ahead and supply what could be a paradigmatic shift in building in China, and if in China, maybe the entire world.
Now, you're talking about going green in Saudi Arabia, as you had just mentioned, Saudi wanting to go green as well with their petro. But China, obviously, now again with Saudi Arabia. The U.S., though, they also want to do it here, too. We've got all those electric cars that they've been wanting to roll out. So let's look at it as a business. China clearly wins many of these business deals around the world when it comes to going green. You know, are they going to kind of win the going green game, too, now with this big deal with Saudi Arabia, do you think, David?
I think that there is certainly, when it comes to sovereign money, China is winning that game. The United States relies primarily on private money, right? Investors both here and abroad investing in green initiatives that may get some tax benefits from the government, but overall are about profitability and not about sovereign subsidy. And so, therefore, it may take us a little bit longer. Private enterprise, we're led to believe in the United States, leads to much better outcomes. But frankly, the deepest pockets that exist, you know, China has got enormously deep pockets, and so does Saudi, especially, you know, as their oil sales continue to go. So they can go ahead and, you know, just in their pockets alone, without attracting any other investors from around the world, essentially win the battle by throwing tons and tons of money, you know, at the initiative.
And I want to ask you this really quick, too. You also have, like I had mentioned, Poland, who Saudi Arabia is about to give, you know, they're about to have half of its supply. Poland, right on the back door of Russia and Belarus. Am I reading too much into that? Is that kind of a make nice move to the U.S., or is that just strictly business, do you think?
I think it's strictly business, and I think also they probably spoke a bit about it with Russia before they did it. They certainly are part of the consortium that makes up OPEC Plus. And so, therefore, I don't think they necessarily want to be so violative of Russia in that. Although, you know, when it comes to OPEC, they have been on opposite sides, both Saudi and Russia, in discussions, you know, over the past years. So, you know, I think, you know, we'd have to wait and see. I really don't have a good read on whether, you know, that was done consensually or whether that's going to be seen as a foul or an offsides by Russia on Saudi Arabia's part.
We'll keep an eye on it, and then you'll be able to have the chance to say I was right or wrong. David Tawil, great to see you again, my friend. Good to see you.
Thank you, Farron.
Ukraine is making the headlines once again. At home, the country is experiencing some division as the former Ukrainian president, Petro Poroshenko, who was backed by the U.S. in 2014, he returned to Ukraine to face treason charges. Internationally, the country is also a hot topic, with days after meeting with Russian officials, all to diffuse tensions over Ukraine. Well, the U.S. is now accusing Moscow of planning a false flag operation as a pretext to invading Ukraine. RT's Alex Mihailovich picks up the story.
It's a serious accusation with little to back it.
Without getting into too much detail, we do have information that indicates that Russia is already working actively to create a pretext for a potential invasion. for a move on Ukraine. In fact, we have information that they've pre-positioned a group of operatives to conduct what we call a false flag operation, an operation designed to look like an attack on them or their or Russian-speaking people in Ukraine, again as an excuse to go in.
U.S. officials claim that Russia has pre-positioned operatives who have been trained in urban warfare to carry out acts of sabotage against pro-Russian rebels using explosives. Not surprisingly, there is skepticism regarding the latest U.S. intel. Journalist Caitlin Johnstone sent out a tweet saying, "So the evidence that NATO powers need to preemptively defend against a Russian invasion of Ukraine is that there are Russian troops in Western Russia and anonymous U.S. officials telling the media that Russia is plotting a false flag. Do I have it right? Is that the evidence?" And Russia's first deputy permanent representative to the United Nations tweeted, "I just wonder, is it the same Russia I have the honor to represent in the UN? If so, then we have no such instructions and no Russian politician spoke about invading Ukraine. Only US, Ukraine, and Western colleagues float this idea. Looks like a classic false flag operation." Russia's Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov addressed the claim as well.
Let's not forget about what the American officials said about the subject of the so-called Russian invasion of Ukraine, namely the spreading of complete misinformation about us preparing a false flag operation by attacking Russian-speaking population in Donbass, no less, to obtain an excuse for said invasion.
While Washington is selling the false flag narrative, it seems like some of its allies are buying it. The EU has joined the Blame Russia mantra. Parroting the words of Washington, here's the German foreign minister speaking in Kiev.
Und der wirksamste Hebel, den wir haben.
And the most effective lever we have to back Ukraine is the unequivocal and above all unanimous commitment of the EU, the G7, NATO, and any further aggression would have a high price for the Russian regime economically, politically, and strategically. And we mean that very seriously.
Washington and its allies have been quick to flatly reject Moscow's request for security guarantees regarding NATO's enlargement ambitions. Since the end of the Cold War, Russia has watched NATO expand to its borders. As for the false flag claims, the White House statement echoes a release from Ukraine's defense ministry last Friday, which said that Russian special services are preparing provocations against Russian forces in an attempt to frame Ukraine. Some believe the origins of the information are both questionable and convenient, which could lead one to ponder if the accusation of a false flag may in fact be the false flag. For News on RT America, I'm Alex Mihailovich.
And with his perspective on everything happening, we are joined by former Pentagon official Michael Maloof. Michael, great to see you. So what do you make of these false flag allegations? I mean, Russia, militarily superior to Ukraine. Do you kind of think these allegations of a false flag would prompt the U.S. to maybe, supply Ukraine with more powerful weapons, more than the $22 million we've already funded them from last week?
Well, I think that's part of it. I also know that the United States and other NATO countries are actually training Ukrainians, special forces, to such as snipers and what have you.
I was going to ask you about that. So talk about that. Yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah, there's a high likelihood that Ukraine could instigate something in order to ensure that they get the maximum of U.S. and NATO support, and that's what makes this entire situation very, very tense and unpredictable. Because so far we have not seen that evidence of a false flag being perpetrated by the Russians. However, there are Western reports that U.S. has been training, and as has other NATO countries, the snipers and what have you for Ukrainians. And it reminds me. This is almost a carbon copy of what happened in 2008 in Georgia. It was snipers who took out Russian peacekeepers in South Ossetia that prompted Russia to come on into into Georgia. And so we see this as a repeat, as a carbon copy. And I know Saakashvili of Georgia at the time, who was then president, was very anxious to get NATO backing to get put into NATO, and the result was killing of Russian peacekeepers and by snipers, by the way. And I know the snipers were trained at Blackwater, so and I know this firsthand. So I think that this is something that we've got to be very, very concerned about. And you're also seeing other Western help coming in from to Ukraine, especially from Germany, especially from right-wing groups, neo-Nazis, if you will, who would love to have a fight. And this is something that given Ukraine's position during World War II against then Soviet Union, this is like history almost repeating itself.
And there's a lot of the history that many Americans don't know about. A lot of that what happened during World War II. But one other really quick question is: you bring up these CIA trained fighters on the front lines in eastern Ukraine. So then I have to ask you, then what role is NATO playing in all of that? Because NATO, I'm sorry, Ukraine's not part of NATO. So are they helping in with that? I got about 40 seconds. I'll give it to you.
Yeah, if CIA is in there, and there's in all likelihood that's the case because they got paramilitary responsibilities. They do the covert side, whereas the Department of Defense does the overt side. And for the covert type of activity, you're going to have them come in and do that. I mean, we did the same thing, by the way, in preparation for the invasion of Iraq. The U.S. did. In fact, I was at the Defense Department when I was asked to develop teams of snipers to go on in to assist the Iraqis against Saddam Hussein. That didn't happen ultimately because they went ahead and just did an invasion. But the point is that we're not above doing something like that. And if it works in one place, and in two places, it's going to work in another, especially in Ukraine.
Michael Maloof getting a little deja vu tonight from history in the past. Michael Maloof, thanks so much. Great to see you.
Thank you.
And still had an update on the Novak Djokovic situation. Now that he's been kicked out of Australia, we've got a special guest on to discuss all of this you're not going to want to miss. In the meantime, make sure you download our Portable TV app where you can catch everything from this show or any other one on this network. We've also got live sports and a whole lot more 24/7 in the palm of your little hand because it's TV as it's meant to be. We'll be right back. Stay there. France, the Netherlands, Germany, and Austria all experiencing unrest over the weekend over COVID vaccine mandates and restrictions. RT correspondent Peter Oliver shows us the latest.
It's been a record-breaking 24 hours in Germany, and not in a good way. When you look at the 7-day indices, that's the number of infections of COVID-19 per 100,000 of the population. It's past 515 nationally. If you look at things locally, in Berlin, it's close to 1,000 per 100,000 of the population. We've also seen the Bundeswehr, that's the German military, say that they're going to implement disciplinary action against its serving members who refuse to get their vaccinations. There are some cases that have already been opened in relation to that. There's also a number of new rules that have come into play in Berlin. If you're riding any of the German capital's public transportation, you're going to have an FFP2 mask covering your nose and mouth. That's a much more substantial face covering than a normal surgical mask. Also, if you're riding that public transportation to any event which there'll be more than 10 people at, well, that event will be covered by the 2G plus rule. What that means is that if you're going there, you need to be vaccinated, recovered, and be able to show a negative test that was taken within the last 24 hours, or that you've had a booster vaccine shot. If you're under 14 years of age, none of that matters because you're not covered by any of those particular rules. However, those people who run the hospitality industry in the German capital say not enough is being done to keep them afloat financially, while everything seems to be done to try and keep bars and restaurants open, at least in some form.
We've owned this place since September 2018. We work providing people not only with food services, but we also hold cultural events, birthdays, and celebrations for our neighbors. The last 2 years haven't been as we wanted them to be. We definitely depend on the money of tourists. Previously, we had groups of them, even people from France, England, and Spain. Now it's dried up, same as the number of birthday celebrations and events, especially with elderly people. This December, we faced a wave of cancellations, coupled with Christmas being cancelled. We definitely feel the impacts of it, and absolutely want to receive more financial support, because we have no more chance of being left standing.
It's not just in Germany that new rules are coming into play on Monday. If you're in Greece and you're over 60 and you're not vaccinated, well, you're going to get a €100 fine. In fact, you're going to get that €100 fine every month until you get vaccinated. Well, schools are also getting underway again in Greece on Monday. On Friday, though, students were extremely unhappy with the Ministry of Education, that building being pelted with missiles by children, saying that they wanted substantial protection against COVID-19 and that the measures that were being put in place were just not enough to do that. Those who were attending that protest said they wanted schools to reopen, but they needed to reopen in a manner that was safe from the virus. In Austria over the weekend, we saw another Saturday of demonstration. Thousands of people on the streets of Vienna. People extremely unhappy with the measures that the Austrian government have taken when it comes to trying to fight against COVID-19. These business owners told us that the measures that have been taken by Vienna are taking them pretty much to the wall.
And now for an update on the Novak Djokovic situation. Today, the tennis star arrived in Belgrade, Serbia, after being deported from Australia for losing an appeal on his canceled visa. Now, Novak stated that while he is disappointed with this decision, he respects the court's ruling and wishes the players, fans, and staff all the best for the tournament. He says he'll now take time to rest and recuperate before making any further comments. So with his expertise on the topic, we are joined by RT senior writer Neb Alic. Neb, thank you so much for coming back on. Third time's a charm. We were praying for him on Friday. The tennis gods were not in our favor. He gets sent back.
It's not even the tennis gods. It's the lockdown gods, the Saint Mask of the Fauci, or whatever they call him down in Australia. No, the decision over the weekend was purely political. It had nothing to do with the sport or health, for that matter. There was a lot of misinformation in the media that he had misfiled his paperwork, he had made some errors on it. No, none of that is true. The minister who signed his expulsion order literally said, "I'm making this decision because he might represent an icon of free choice, and we can't have that." Because that would basically bring into question the 2 years of us repressing the people of Australia in the name of their health.
And the question of the third Groundhog Day, the third Groundhog year of all of this.
The endless pandemic. So again, the Australian government was very specific. They said they were deporting Djokovic because the fact that he has not taken the jab represents a deadly threat to their authority. Literally. And so it had nothing to do with tennis, nothing to do with public health. It had everything to do with their authority as a government. Now, this is a mighty gracious thing that he said. The statement that you quoted. And let nobody after this ever say that he doesn't have as much class as Nadal or Federer or any of these other people.
Because he could have come out swinging, no pun intended, on this.
He could have absolutely claimed political persecution, because that's literally what just happened.
But now let's look forward now, because we already have a number of other tennis tournaments coming out saying yes or no. So what's the latest with that?
So the latest reports today were that the French Open might be in danger for Djokovic now because France has just voted for a vaccine passport. However, after that flashed and made rounds around the world, and in that specific context, some French readers of ours reached out to me and literally showed me the documentation that says that the French vaccine pass, which has been rolling out slowly over the past few months, has a provision for natural immunity. Well, since Djokovic had gotten over the virus, he shouldn't have any problem demonstrating natural immunity. So that's not nowhere near as dire as the news makes it out to be. If, again, this is about the actual facts and the health pass, not a political attempt to prevent him from competing, which we cannot rule out.
And one of the other things that's really interesting, really quick, is I was seeing the talk all over ESPN today, and you had a lot of his sponsors. He has won, 9 Australian Opens now, and many of the sponsors now were even thinking about, our names aren't going to be out there anymore with Novak. Obviously this is getting deeper in the reporting, but any thoughts or any rumblings on losing sponsorships?
I hate to say things one way or the other because you never know. I might jinx it.
Right.
But I would think that from the business standpoint, given the absolute explosion of his fandom over the weekend, that he's gotten a lot more social media following, that his fans are louder and stronger than ever, you would think that corporations that are interested in profit might think of the bottom line and not cut him off.
Right.
But international capital isn't necessarily always motivated by profit. If there is a political persecution agenda, there's no faster way to prove its existence than these sponsors who stand to make a lot of money off of him suddenly dropping him and giving up this money for the sake of enforcing international Covidianism.
Well, it's always that I always think of, for those that don't know, the Barbra Streisand effect, or the Streisand effect as they call it. She didn't want her house on Google Maps or something anymore, and then all of a sudden every house she's just all over Google Images. So that's the Streisand effect, folks. So when you cancel somebody, it might actually work out more in their favor. We'll see with Novak Djokovic, but hopefully he's going to be able to stick around and play tennis. And
all he wants to do is play tennis, and it's these people that are making a political martyr out of him, completely unforced error on their part, and they should stop before it's too late.
Yep, again, no Streisand effect. We don't need to see it. It's real and it works. Neb Malich, always great to have you. Thanks so much again. Day 3 on this story. Well, that is our news, folks. Hope you learned something. If you got friends looking for another newscast, send them our way. As always, folks, good night, and may the good news be yours.